Now I would like to express, first of all, our fascination of your exposition, and to say some words concerning Russian Orthodox eschatological vision of the situation. What is important, that a perfect and very strange convergence of some crucial points. I have spoken recently with one saint father, Vladimir Tsvetkov. He is a monk and he is a chief of monastery who belongs to the tradition of the elders of the starets, Russian starets, and he was introduced in the Orthodox eschatology, Russian eschatology, and I have asked him to name the most important points of this eschatology. So, according to him, all the starets, all the elders of Russian Orthodox Church prophesied the spiritual renaissance, rebirth of Russian Christian tradition after the time of Bolshevist or Antichrist oppression. So what now we are witnessing of a fulfillment of the tradition that was made before Bolshevists, but they were more or less identified, their rule was foreseen, and the end of this rule was predicted. What should go next? Rebirth of Orthodox Church and the rebirth of Russia. At the same time, 2 points were after that, 3 points. The wars and with the great suffering of the Russia, and also the many challenges to Moscow and many damages that we will suffer. So very devastating wars waged against us in the future. After reconquest of the Constantinople, precisely that the elders of Russian Orthodox Church affirm that Russia will conquer Constantinople and free Hagia Sophia and restore it as Christian cathedral. But that will be in the animosity against Western Christianity that is recognized as a kind of fallen branch of our church. So it is all concerns only Orthodox Eastern Christian tradition. And the last thing, that was the great war against Israel and the reconquest of Constantinople. So there are not Muslims mentioned expressly, but that rebirth of Christendom in Russia, reconquest of Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, and the war against Pax Judaica. And in all these predictions, the rule of the international Jewry was recognized as the sign of the end of the time and as the representation of the rule of the Antichrist. So there is perfect convergence with what you have said, and that is also quite opposite to what Salafi Muslims affirm, because they are for alliance with the West and against so-called Russian oppression against Muslim minority. So we have two global visions, not one Christians, the other Muslims, but two global visions, one Muslim Christian that you defend and we defend, and the other Muslim Christian vision that is defended by Westerners, the Zionists, and the Jews. So you have promptly pointed out that the idea of the Jews is not all of them.
No.
So, and that gives the possibility to regard the third monotheistic phase as double. So they are part of the Jews. There will be, I think that major part of the Jews will be on other
That's right.
side, but there will be a little part, maybe few of them on our side.
Right. That's right.
So it is a kind. What is important that this line, eschatological line, divides not religions between themselves, but inside of three religions there are two contradictory eschatological positions. Only two in Islam, represented by Syekh Imran Hosein, and by, I have spoken some days ago with President of Iran, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, personally, and he confirmed absolutely eschatological vision. The only difference in the vision of Imran Hosein, Ahmadinejad, the role of Mahdi played in this situation, because Imran Hosein stresses the point of the return of the Jesus, and the Iranian stress the point of return of Mahdi. That is difference. But geopolitically speaking, that is absolute convergency between Iranian eschatology and eschatology expressed by Syekh Imran Hosein. There is the same difference, the dividing line in Christianity, Western and Eastern, and there is the same line, more deeper maybe and not so obvious, inside of Judaism. One part of Judaism that is Zionist, Pax Judaica, and the other that we could presume to be different. So I would like to thank you for your exposition, and maybe you could develop some point concerning this astonishing convergency of two forms of eschatological thought.
I deliberately paused when I suggested that perhaps Turkey would invade Syria, and that would be the beginning of the great wars. I'm not a prophet. No, I make mistakes. I'm just suggesting that perhaps this might happen. So no one should say that I'm prophesying that this will happen. No, that's not part of a scholarly discussion at all. This is an option that they have. This is perhaps the best option that they have. And I see no reason why they should not be pursuing this option of a Turkish invasion of Syria. A Turkish invasion of Syria would not only be for the purpose of trying to bring about regime change in Syria. They also want to deliver a very humiliating blow to Russia. If Russia loses Syria, Syria has a defense treaty with Russia. It's an ally of Russia, not like Libya. And if Russia loses her naval base on the Syrian Mediterranean coast, and it is replaced with a NATO base, the loss of face for Russia would be strategically disastrous. There would be military implications as well, but I'm not a military strategist to be able to dwell on that point. I think the master plan which the Ottoman pursued and which the Salafis are now pursuing after the Ottomans is to drive a wedge as deep as they can possibly drive between the world of Islam and Rome. That's why the Ottoman Empire did so many things that it did in enslaving Christian women, and then they became members of the harem. Ottoman sultans never married, because if they married, their wives would have rights and the children would have legal rights, but slaves don't have rights. So they had only slaves, and they were all Christian women. I think one was a Russian, the wife, the concubine of Suleiman. They took Christian boys, which again is shameful for us, and converted them to Christianity, to Islam. This never happened in our history. Never, never, never. The Quran expressly prohibits. There is no compulsion in religion. And then these boys, having been converted to Christianity, were brought up to become the elite Janissary fighting force which protected the Sultan himself. And so the Ottoman sultans did not trust their own people. When Hagia Sophia was converted to a masjid, I think that was a dagger that was plunged deepest of all into the heart of Rome, in consequence of which there has been abiding hatred for Islam in many parts of Rome. And we saw some of it in the Bosnian War in Srebrenica. We see it in Greece, where that pain and that hatred is still there because of what the Ottomans did. But this was not enough. They need something more. So if they bring about regime change in Syria, sadly I have to say, the world will have to expect a slaughter of the Christians of Syria at the hands of the Salafi. And they're not going to be slaughtering the Christians because of any enmity with the Christians of Syria. I think the Christians of Syria will be slaughtered in order to drive the deepest wedge of all between the world of Islam and Rome. And this is why Syria is so important, and we are grateful to Russia that Syria has not become another Libya. We put a question mark behind Russia, another question mark behind China over what happened in Libya. And one day probably Russia will explain to us what happened. Why did Russia and why did China sacrifice Libya the way they did? But Russia has stood up in Syria, and because of that military stance of Russia, so far Syria has not fallen. But if Turkey attacks Syria, then the game changes, because Iran will then become part of the war. Iran will not stand idly by, and Russia will then have to accept that its historic moment, its moment in history has arrived. Russia will not be able to fold its arms and stand idly by if Turkey attacks Syria. Perhaps Christian eschatology may want to speak and recognize a Turkish attack on Syria to be the opening round for the eventual conquest of Constantinople. And so I expect the great wars are going to now commence one after the other. But we are fighting an enemy who has a Messianic obsession. It is an irrational obsession. An enemy who is hell-bent without regard for consequences in achieving his goal. It doesn't matter how many must die. It doesn't matter even if most of mankind must perish. It doesn't matter if thousands of nuclear weapons are going to be used in a great war. It does not matter to that enemy. They are hell-bent on achieving their objective of establishing Israel as a ruling state in the world. And so for Russia to believe that you can sit back and the fight is between the Muslims and Israel, you'll be living in dreamland. Because they want Russia to also bend her knee and bow before them. And they want China to bend her knee and bow before them. And that's why Russia is ringed with nuclear missiles all around you. But I don't think the Russians are fools. I think the Russians know very well what the game plan is. When these wars start and Russia becomes part of the wars, we're then heading towards what the Christians call Armageddon and the Muslims call the Malhama. And our Prophet has spoken about those great wars, and that greatest all wars, as being such a great war, he says, that birds will fall from the sky, indicating perhaps radiation in the sky, preventing, for example, electronic gadgetry from working, preventing, therefore, electronic warfare, preventing cruise missiles and fighter aircraft and so on operating. So great will that war be. At the end of that war, or towards the end of that war, comes the conquest of Constantinople. And I've asked myself many times, well, why would a Muslim army march to Constantinople? For the Christians, yes, I can understand. Hagia Sophia. This was your city. But why would the Muslims want to march to Constantinople? Is it simply because we want to wage a war in alliance with the Christians to conquer Constantinople? It doesn't make sense to me. A Muslim army should be marching towards Jerusalem, not to Constantinople. And I've come to the conclusion, and when I give an opinion, of course, I always say, I don't want you to accept it. No, unless you're convinced that it is correct. But please don't deny me the freedom to offer an opinion. That the conquest of Constantinople is strategically important because of the Bosphorus. And the Bosphorus is strategically important because in the winter time Russia does not have a naval outlet except through the Black Sea. And this is why for centuries now they have done every single thing they could possibly do to deny Russia control over the Bosphorus. They used the Ottomans. They used the Ottomans for 450 years, and then after that they got NATO to replace the Ottomans. And so when that conquest of Constantinople takes place, the military significance for me is that Russia will now be able to pass through the Bosphorus. And since at that time perhaps aerial warfare will no longer be possible, it is the land and the sea. The land will also be devastated with nuclear warfare. So naval warfare becomes very important. And the Russian fleet, or what is left of the Russian fleet, and the Eastern European fleet, passing through the Bosphorus, pose a threat, a significant threat to Israel. And this is why I say that Russia's moment in history has arrived, because great wars are now at hand, and Russia's role in these great wars will be different from the First World War and the Second World War.